so many gains of planche without training the planche. Look, I'm heavily biased towards the planche. I love it. I would legally marry planche if it was allowed. But not everyone does, and when you're average side adult or bigger, tall, long limbs, heavy person, big legs, long legs, planche is going to be very, very difficult. And you might find that within your training, you're hitting a lot of dead ends in terms of progress, and it might just not be as motivating as it is for someone like myself to train. Let me introduce you guys to the pike press. This skill is one of those skills that can create branches to so many other physical attributes. Not only your straight arm pushing strength, but your handstand control, your flexibility, mobility, your ability to compress. There's so many gains to be made that trickle down into just your general physical ability, that if planche is not the highest priority on your list, you might really enjoy adding pike press training to your program instead of just raw planche strength. If we talk generally, there's three types of handstand press. There is your tuck handstand press, your straddle handstand press, and your pike handstand press. And I would say you would get most of your gains by training towards your straddle handstand press and then evolving that into your shoulder press. Looking at more the pike and the tuck as being a little bit more specific to raw strength, yes, they obviously benefit from compression and mobility, but they do just demand and benefit more from shoulder strength. And that is why for someone like myself who invests a lot in shoulder pressing, enjoys this variation more. But I will say you will probably find more content available and more information on the shoulder press and straddle press, and most of that advice still applies to your pike press. So you can simply just take what you learn from any tutorials or information that you find and apply it to a pike position instead of a straddle. You could even train the straddle and shoulder and still find a lot of benefits within your pike press carryover. The pike handstand press is still a handstand press, so we're looking mainly at our strength in shoulder flexion and our ability to compress. Let's start by having a look at some of the prerequisites for a pike press. There's probably ways to regress specific pike press training to an ability that works for your level, but it would be really beneficial to be able to hold a handstand, say upwards to 20 to 30 seconds, to have a solid tuck planche, and to be able to forward fold and touch your hands to the ground. Let's just say hands flat to the ground. Two movements you can start with to feel that intensity and demand of the pike press are going to be your pike floats. So that's going to be a forward fold and emphasizing heavy elevation with your shoulders, leaning your weight forward and seeing if you can get the toes to float and pull towards your hands just that a little bit more. This will highlight whether it is your compression, your strength, or both that is lacking, and will give you an idea of how you can organize your accessories. But this is just a great one to get the feel of what liftoff is like and where the demand lies. The other one to start with is a pike negative. So that is going from a straight handstand and pulling your legs down through pike all the way touching to the ground. Now you can obviously play around with range of motion here and build the box or a touch point much higher for your feet to come down, but you eventually want to build that to go from your straight all the way down to your toes touching to the floor. We just want to be mindful that there is that compression element to a handstand press, and we don't want to purely be leaning or treating this like a planche. We want to be having the hips as high as possible in those float attempts before the toes lift off, not just leaning and leaning forward until you feel like your feet want to come away from the ground or you're going to fall. And within those negatives, you want to be pulling your toes down whilst keeping your hips as high as possible and minimizing lean as much as you can. If you've been heavily into your planche training or are using this in relation to planche, you'll probably have the strength needed, and it will let you automate that so you can really focus on how much you're folding in half. As you start to make some headway with how the floats and the negatives are feeling, you can start to add some movements that are addressing the concentric portion of a pike press. And that's going to be quite obvious to begin, where we're just going to have our feet on a higher surface so that there is less range we have to press up through all the way to a straight handstand. But the other one that is really, really valuable for that initial press and addressing the intensity that is involved there is the deficits, where we set up on a box with our hands on the box but our feet off, and we're looking to press our hips as high as possible. Now, in this footage, I can rely a lot on my planche strength, so I can get quite a decent amount of lean without having too great of an ability to compress. Hey, we've all got better attributes and worse attributes than others, right? I can lean a lot. With that, we are looking to get the hips as high as possible, and it doesn't matter if you're not getting your feet level with your hands. That is just one of the goalposts in your journey. Here, we're just looking to press as high as possible. The box allows the hips to purely have an upward trajectory as you go for that press, and somewhat minimizes the amount you can compensate, and that is really, really valuable. And at the final frontier of this training is actually doing your pike press from flat, so it's very much just going to feel like one of those floats that just carries on all the way up to your straight handstand. But then we can go beyond that. We want to start to increase the range of motion to moves that even I am struggling with at the moment. I really need to develop more compression ability for these, is to do that deficit all the way up to your handstand, and also going from an L. You can do this as a negative to begin, so going from handstand all the way down to the L, but eventually going from your L sit and pressing all the way up into your handstand. The deficit as an accessory or complementary movement can really help to close that gap if the L press to handstand is one of your main goals. And then ultimately is doing this as close as you can get flat to the ground. Now, I think there would be arguments out there to do with the more you increase your compression ability, the closer you'll be able to get to the ground. And then on the other end is having anatomical limitations, where some people just, as compressed as they can get, they might not be able to do it flat on the ground. I would, as a lifetime goal, want to continue to see if that is actually true. I'm nowhere near doing it at the moment, but I would want to continue to improve that compression and see if it's possible. But just know that is for an adult, very, very demanding of a skill, but looks awesome. What would be a good way to program your pike press? Now, of course, you can cherry pick exercises, movements from this video and just put them into your current program. But if you were basing a session around this specific skill, I would purposely start with some mobility to begin. For me today, I did a bit of a circuit of compression leg lifts, Jefferson curls, and then some of those press floats, just as a way to prep the shoulders, to stretch the hamstrings, and to wake up the hip flexors and the abdominals for all the demands of this press. And I went through that for 3 rounds. After I've done more of that mobility, flexibility work, I would then go into the skill work as my second part once I feel that warm up. And I would be going for whatever level I'm at, whether it's going to be the negative, whether it's going to be the deficits, or if I'm going for the full pike press attempts. This is the time to do those movements. You can use those as stepping stones and just see how you feel for the day, working up to whatever is the most advanced movement you can do. Or if you have a rough idea of where you're at and you're looking to just keep a consistent effort, like a 6 or 7 out of 10 for your skill work, you can choose where you're at, say the negative, and do 3 to 4 sets. To finish off, I would then finish with some strength work. So this could be more specific, your planche, say tuck or advanced tuck. Here, we are looking to just build that strength in shoulder flexion, but we don't want to do that before the pike press because we don't want to be bringing any fatigue into the skill work where our brain is trying to connect the dots with what we're trying to do in combination with compression and strength demands. So save the strength for after the skill work. And then optional at the end, you can finish with more passive stretching just to see if you can get some more range of motion for your hamstrings and see if that carries over into your next session. So we're kind of finishing on a little bit of a calm, cool note. If you're looking for more variety, more fun, something different to planche, but you still want to continue to improve your pressing strength, pike press could just be the skill for you.